The 10 basic rules for safety at sea. Nautical tips in brief, follow us. The premise, as usual, is that if you are a boatswain, a captain, a commander, or in any case an expert, you might find it boring to hear these 10 rules that for you are the ABCs of sailing at sea. However, there are many novices, or in any case, people who sail at sea who might not have this confidence. Let's say with sea navigation, and so I quickly repeat the main things to follow at sea to give you a heads up on everything. I'll tell you right away. The 10 chapters: 1. Life jackets, 2. VHF, 3. Onboard equipment, 4. GPS and navigation systems, 5. Alcohol on board or on yourself, AIS or EPIRB. Weather bulletins as well as night navigation, right of way. Stopping at sea, what to do. In addition to this, I will add an 11th, which is checking the condition of your vessel, boat, sailboat or whatever you have, and the condition of batteries, plugs, and fuel. Life jackets are not mandatory to wear. While navigating, maybe you're expecting sunshine, so having it striped isn't the best thing in life. Of course, in rough sea conditions, or if you realize that navigation is particularly risky, dangerous, there's a risk of falling overboard, so I strongly recommend wearing them in this case. Why? Because in case of an emergency, being able to find the life jackets that are usually stored in lockers or somewhere on the boat. It's not that simple, because at that moment I would be very stressed about wanting to save your life or not wanting to harm anyone. So, if you see that the weather conditions are worsening, have worsened, then you are putting the conditions of the entire crew and everyone on board the boat at risk. Make sure that everyone wears a life jacket, but it is not mandatory. The VHF radio is a radio fundamentally, forgive me now, but to make myself understood, it's like a CB, so it's not a mobile phone, but a radio. We are not delving into the technology of VHF, so the type of radio waves it uses. But let's delve into the type of safety system that is intrinsic to this system, specifically the VHF A di bello, which is accessible by sea over very long and very high distances, thanks to receivers and repeaters from the port captains and the control systems that are spread across the sea. That said, it works much better than the current mobile phone coverage. We're not talking about satellite phones, which we will get to. We will get to Starlink. We will achieve complete coverage, but that's in 2025. As of today, VHF technology is the safest technology you can have at sea. So, if you plan to sail at sea and not very close to the coast, getting a VHF, aside from having a certain limit, which is also mandatory, getting a VHF is always an additional measure to improve safety on board. Because the Harbour Master's offices and also the ports are always the Harbour Master's offices, for sure the ports maybe, not always, but the Harbour Master's offices, let's talk about this, are always listening on channel 16. The condition is that you have the VHF on channel 16, you find yourself in serious trouble, you notify the Harbour Master's office. 3. The safety equipment. There are not only life jackets, life belts, or whatever we want to call them, but there is also a ring, a life buoy, so a life preserver, heavy enough to be thrown with a 30-meter floating line, in case someone falls overboard, and you can go to retrieve them without having to dive in and risk drowning or having problems at sea yourself. In addition to this, of course, we must also have the rest of the equipment. There are lists, even on our blog Barche Bellandi. There is a downloadable list of everything needed to navigate safely and also what is mandatory to have. Having said that, certainly the emergency signals then, flares and smoke buoys absolutely need to be maintained and kept up to date, because they expire every 4 years, 3 or 4 years depending. So please pay attention. Check the validity of the rescue equipment regarding signaling and keep them updated. Always check the onboard GPS fire extinguishers as well, so the system can provide your location to communicate it to others but not to others, generally because they need to reach you. In case of emergency, indeed, communicating the exact position of your boat, vessel, sailboat, inflatable boat, whatever is at sea is not only useful but also incredibly increases your safety. Since now there are also cell phones, or rather I think most smartphones have a system inside. As we are in 2025, they have a GPS system inside. Okay, that's great. But your cell phone can fall into the sea, it might not work, it might have poor reception. Who knows, the satellites or whatever, having a GPS on board. If you intend to sail a bit far from the coast, it wouldn't hurt to have a system to identify exactly where you are, the costs. Now they have dropped so much that really with 200 euros you can install an onboard GPS, maybe even less. Alcoholic drinks, not so much on board because they don't do harm on board until you ingest them, but on board, your body. Please avoid any type of alcoholic drink. But not because I want to be the killjoy of the situation. I also go out for dinner, I also like to have fun, to party. And so it's not wrong. It's just that at sea, the attention needed for navigation is often underestimated. On one hand, I tell you that on the road it's worse. Even more so, because there are so many things that can happen, but our average level of attention is very high, precisely because a person might cross, a car might make a wrong maneuver, or you might suddenly find a car stopped, or it brakes in front of you. Consequently, our perception, our attention is really high. At sea, on the other hand, we are in open sea, we are in open lake, we are sailing, there is no road, there are no signs, there are no other boats within 5 meters. Consequently, everything is easy, and thus the distraction is very high. If the distraction is very high, and by mistake, a surfer that you didn't see because they are in a blind spot from your boat. You are sailing really slowly, maybe you are going at 7 to 8 knots, 5 knots, and at a certain point, this surfer crosses in front of your bow, and you are heading in that direction. The readiness, your reflexes, even at the level of, I don't know, in terms of readiness, they are really affected. Like anything else neurologically in your body happens when you consume alcohol. Or maybe, who knows, you are sailing at 20, 22, 25 knots. So without going crazy, but at a certain point you are caught up in this fun. And you don't realize that unfortunately your friend, your companion, whoever was sitting on the aft sun deck, got distracted for a moment and fell into the sea. The quickness of reflexes to be able to decelerate immediately, make a turn, which if nothing happens at the stern, but if it had been at the bow, so please be careful. Reflex is always 100% ready. More technological systems and still more suitable for boats that are truly meant to cross the sea. It is right that even if you do not navigate in these conditions, you should know that they exist, which are the AIS and the EPIRB. The AIS is fundamentally a navigation tracker for route conditions. So, you, from your satellite GPS charting system, you can understand how it is behaving, perhaps the tanker a few miles from you, to avoid getting on its route fundamentally. As for the EPIRB, it is also a positioning system, but it is practically for emergencies. So it is a system that communicates directly in case of emergency, positioning all the conditions of your vessel directly to the authorities. So it's a system that requires zero worries. Oh God, something happened, I press it, that's okay. These two systems, of course, are not mandatory. If you have a boat, maybe, I don't know, from 5, 6, 7, 8 meters, I don't know, and you sail 3 miles, 4 miles from the coast. They are not necessary, but certainly knowing they exist, and perhaps, why not, equipping yourself with them isn't a bad idea. They don't issue weather bulletins, so how to interpret them and how to understand how they work without taking a meteorology course. 1, because I am not able to do it for you, I don't have the instructions or the fundamental knowledge to tell you. Of course, let's get to the point. What can really be useful without going crazy with a long explanation? And I repeat, it's not my subject. The first thing is to become familiar with the symbols, the symbology, so to understand well what they mean. The full sun, the half sun, the drops, the wind, to understand well also how to read the wind strengths. I said strength, but it's the wind speed, because as stated in the bulletins, there are bulletins that indicate meters per second, knots, consequently not to get confused, to create a sort of mental scheme so that you know that this a type of wind is a strong wind for you. So whether you are on a sailboat or a motorboat, it doesn't matter much, in the sense that for a sailboat, it might be indicated that there should be at least a minimum amount of wind to have fun. But in case the wind is very strong, it is dangerous both for the sailboat and possibly for the motorboat as well, because both conditions can create various navigation difficulties. Besides getting familiar, you also need to start getting familiar. In addition to those symbols with the terminologies, try to understand what the pressures are. Barometric. Try to understand what the marine weather conditions are. So the height of the waves. So set parameters for yourself where you say, okay, the wave conditions for me are up to this point. The wind conditions are fine up to this point. For me, they are fine. If I see the half sun, I worry about these two factors here. And another very important thing, always check the medium term forecasts, not just the short term ones. So it's better if you look at today's weather indications, but maybe you're coming back tonight. Who cares about tomorrow? You never know. Suppose there's some problem and you have to stay at sea. That said, also check the forecasts for the next day, because it's only through the forecasts of 2 compared days that you can see if there's an increase or decrease in high pressure, hence the arrival or non-arrival of bad weather. So, I recommend you learn to become familiar with weather conditions. As for the apps, there are many. I personally use Windy when I sail, but I don't get anything from Windy, obviously, also because they are giants. Choose whichever one you want. Really choose whichever one you want, because there are many. Evaluate the valid ones, and then afterwards, if you feel comfortable with this one or that one, use whichever you want. Night navigation. Let's assume you are at sea, and let's assume you don't have a radar. So, if you intend to always sail at night, or in any case to navigate even at night, the advice is to get yourself a radar. Why? Because fundamentally they are your eyes, even in case of complete darkness due to fog, or any situation where you can't see, but let's assume you don't have it. The radar. So, a very important thing that many are not clear about, because maybe they have never sailed at night, is that headlights are not needed like for cars. I know that those who sail might find this amusing, but it's not exactly intuitive for someone who is used to only using a car, a motorcycle, or whatever it is, which has a headlight that illuminates the road. So the path is lit, and the important thing is to keep the reference signals, like the side stripes, or the guardrail, or other things, or the road surface itself. At sea there isn't. There's complete openness. The headlight, to see ahead, doesn't exist at sea, and if you turn it on, it will only distract you. The light you see on boats, or that you have on your boat, will only be useful when you are really close to another boat, near a port, near the mooring spot, to illuminate things there at 20, 30, 50 meters. It's true that they illuminate even at 150, 200 meters, but that headlight, while navigating, does nothing but distract your eye, because it focuses on a beam of light, and it doesn't let you see what's around you. When sailing at night, okay, the tendency is to have visibility miles away, and of course a greater perception near the boat. Because if I'm navigating, I also need to be aware of the conditions beneath the boat, but when I'm there, it's too close. So I have to anticipate everything around me well in advance, so don't think about the headlights. The lights you have on board are for other vessels to identify you. So the red, the green, the 360-degree white. That said, when you navigate at night, keep your eyes open, avoid alcohol, and really look around a lot. Anything that might seem strange, slow down and try to understand what it is. Right of way then. About right of way, it's not that there's a lot of confusion, because the rules exist. It's just that there's a lot of confusion on the part of the users. So I will only talk about 3 main right-of-way rules, which are boat, sail, boat, motor, inflatable boat. Basically anything powered by a motor compared to a sailboat. The sailboat, as well as surfing and anything that sails, always has the right of way in any type of maneuver. Of course, if you are with a broken boat in the middle of the sea and a 15-meter boat is coming towards you, okay, I agree, but wave your arms, okay? You should display the flag that you have a malfunction on board your boat. But let's leave that aside. Let's be clear. Wave your arms, shout, sound the horn, make it clear that you have no ability to maneuver. So, sailboats, meaning everything that moves with the wind, have absolute right of way over everything that is motor powered. The other important and very important right of way is that of very large vessels like an oil tanker, a cargo ship, but also a ferry, to make a 90-degree turn. It really takes a huge amount of time, so if you say it's coming towards me, it will move. No, it takes even 3, 4, 5 miles and almost 10 kilometers to make a 90-degree maneuver. A container ship, what are we talking about? We're talking about the fact that you need to move. It has the course, it has the right of way, it has the right to navigate, but more importantly, because it doesn't have the ability to make last-second maneuvers, so it can't suddenly move. Having said that, any type of boat, and since I think that I'm addressing those who have boats, let's say under 30 meters, let's put it that way, but in my opinion under 10 or under 15, turn and get out of the way of the big boats. The other right-of-way rules to respect, which I often see sailors not following, are the right-of-way rules for entering the port. So, the right-of-way, whether entering or exiting. The right-of-way belongs to those entering. So if you are leaving the port and you see a boat or a dinghy, whether it's a sailboat or a motorboat, entering the port, the one entering the port has the right of way over the one exiting, based on a simple principle, easy to understand. The one that is a bit outside the port, therefore at sea, could be dangerous. It could be, I don't know, maybe it's entering. Or because the sea conditions do not allow for safe navigation, so it enters a safe port. Hence the cool expression of going to a calm port, a safe port, a seaport, so something very calm. Why? Because I might have difficulties at sea. That said, they have priority, let them enter, then you go out, okay? So, first those who enter, and then those who exit. I'm stuck in the middle of the sea now. What do I do? Well, the first thing to do, whether you're taking on water, whether you're stopped due to a problem, engine, whether you're stopped for lack of fuel, lack of electrical power to restart the engine, in case it's an engine, but also in the case of sails. Because sails have their own engine, and maybe that day there is calm, so no wind, or they have a technical failure with the sails or the rigging. That said, there are different types of problems that can occur, but also a person who has been unwell on board. The first thing to do is to seek help. At sea, the idea of I enjoyed it myself doesn't exist. Get help. And primarily, there are the competent authorities. So VHF, notify, ask for help. They will tell you case by case what to do, because if it's a condition of a completely calm sea, a summer condition where there are boats around at sea, let's say the danger is really minimized and you are simply, in quotes, simply ran out of fuel, and they tell you to wait and get towed. So maybe they tell you we can't go out because we are busy with emergencies. In quotes, you call the port, the port calls a service from the port or one of the ports that can go out and bring you back to port. Obviously, this service, if it was due to your negligence, is at your expense. So unfortunately, you would have to spend some money. However, on the other hand, no one is obliged to bring a can of gasoline to a car that has stopped on the road because you forgot to refuel. I do you a favor, in quotes, and you repay this favor. Either you repay it in money or you repay it for the service, or you repay it for the invoice, or you repay it with a favor in return. I don't know. But of course, it's something not owed because you're not in a life or death situation. It's different in an emergency. Even helicopters arrive. That's not the point. So please notify the VHF in case of danger. Otherwise, seek help. Through the port, through your service, your storage, and try to understand how to intervene and what to do. 11th then, outside the norm, but not least in importance. In fact, perhaps it should be done even earlier, still on land or at the boat's mooring place. There are 3 fundamental things I remember when I wanted to manage storage directly when I was quite younger. Plugs, fuel, and battery. These are the 3 main things for boats that cause problems, but they are truly the main ones. Plugs, fuel, and battery. I think that is the cause. I believe it accounts for over 70–80% of the issues with boats stranded in the middle of the lake or sea. Fuel, check how much fuel you need. Consider that based on your engine, the engine you have on board. You will see the tables. You can ask the person who sold you the boat, the dealer, how much your engine consumes at an average speed. Once you calculate that, you need to calculate at least 30% more than your planned navigation. You can sail for 3 hours at 20 knots. You know that at 20 knots, your boat consumes, let's say, 10 liters per hour. Let's be very optimistic. Consequently, do all the multiplications, check if the liters match that, calculating 30% more. A practical example, for instance, 20 knots, 10 liters at 20 knots. So, 20 knots of sailing, 3 hours of sailing, 2, 4, 6, 60 liters needed. 66 and 12 stayed. It becomes 78 liters that are needed, but because the 30% can be useful for anything, so 80 liters. I have to start, however, with 80 liters, knowing that perhaps they consume 60. Please pay attention. Do these battery calculations, check the condition of the battery. Any instrument today, when you turn the key, tells you the battery voltage. What condition are your batteries in? Do you have more than one battery? Check them. Turn the battery switches and check or use the selector to verify if they are all charged. Because you never know, please be careful. And then the other thing is for those who have the boat out of the water on a trailer, so they launch and retrieve. In a day, typically a boat under 9 meters. Please, a silly mistake. That is if you have removed the plugs to wash the boat. Now, in recent years, almost no one. In the last 15 or 20 years, almost no manufacturer makes a bilge plug. That completely empties the boat of water, but admit that if it were there or you had it done to keep the boat always clean and washed, please make sure to check. So remember these 3 things: batteries, plugs, fuel. Safe sailing. If you don't want to miss any of our nautical tips and sea adventures, all you have to do is subscribe to this channel. If you managed to stay until the end, well done, great job. That said, maybe these were topics that could interest you, I hope. And I have nothing more to add, also because I would become even more tedious. So I still want to say goodbye. Make sure to have fair winds, and always keep an eye on the weather.